Autoline After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, solutions for your journey.
Visit our website, Autoline.tv, where you can watch us live Thursday afternoons. Get your daily fix with Autoline Daily and in-depth analysis and interviews with Autoline This Week. There's all that and much more at Autoline.tv.
Gary.
John, how are you?
I'm doing well, doing well.
So we should tell the people who are watching or listening that we're actually in the studio together for the first time since March 2020.
That's right.
Except for the fact that we're actually like 50 feet away from one another.
I know, because, all this virtual stuff is great, but we were getting a microphone echo. So you got to be in one of the offices. I'm in the main studio, but hey, at least we're in the same building.
Exactly. So progress.
Yeah, somewhat of progress. That's right. Hey, we've got a great show coming up, but we also have Mike Austin joining us. And, some of you longtime Autoline After Hours viewers are going to go, oh, yeah, Mike Austin. He's with, let's see, he's not with Guidehouse Insights. What the heck is this, Mike?
New room in the house, new job. I'm EV analyst for Guidehouse Insights. It's the intelligence arm of a larger consulting company. Some of you might be familiar with Sam Abdul Samed, who I also work with, and I'm fortunate enough to have a lot of interest and be employed in many different aspects of that interest. So out of the classic car world, back into all the way back into the forefront of the new car world, working on EVs and mobility, and the job is different from journalism, but not altogether different. It's just a lot more detailed and a lot more diving in. So, in general, just being an expert on the market and digging into it, and so far it's been great in that aspect of just following all the way down the rabbit hole of any topic.
So you've gone from the past and you're entering the future.
Yes.
Well, that's perfect timing to bring in Jeff Hemphill, our special guest for today, because he's all about future technology. And Jeff, it's great to have you back on the show here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So Jeff, if people think about Schaeffler, they might think of Schaeffler as a very mechanically oriented company. In the time that I've known you, I don't know that we've talked about mechanical things almost at all. So give us a sense of what Schaeffler does.
Yeah, it's been a remarkable journey. I can tell you, I started there 35 years ago working on manual transmission clutches, which of course you can hardly buy one of those now in the US. So we've gone from the, stamped sheet metal cast iron parts and all the way up into 4-in-1 e-axles now. So slowly over the years, first of all, managed to basically save the Worcester business by transitioning from the manual transmission to the automatic transmission parts market. So that was a good education in how to cross the chasm, if you will, from an old to a new technology. And now we're trying to replicate that journey as we move from automatic transmission parts up into parts for electrification. I mentioned e-axles, but also very exciting area for us is the chassis mechatronics area. So like rear steer, for example, we have a couple production applications for rear steer actuators coming up. So virtually everything we're working on today has wires coming out of it, if not a little computer embedded in it. So that's also been personally very interesting because I'm a mechanical engineer. I won't tell you what I got in my electrical engineering course that you all are required to take, but it wasn't good. And now I've had to revisit all those, not only that, but also some chemical engineering. And it's really, really been a energizing, interesting journey.
Jeff, in fact, that's what we wanted you on the show. As Gary mentioned, Schaeffler is one of the biggest suppliers in the world, but it's been, let's call it a legacy supplier. And now you guys have got a transition. You mentioned some of the technologies, but you guys are working on very advanced and very efficient electric motors, hub motors, advanced battery systems, steer by wire. Take us through a little bit of has it been traumatic for the company to make these changes? Has it been a struggle? What is it like to take a legacy supplier and transition it to all this new stuff?
Well, in a lot of ways, it's been maybe a little bit easier than we expected. And I think part of the reason for that is you could call it a strength or a flaw of Schaeffler, but we never give up on a business. So we still have a business stamping out little washers for planetary gears, you know. So and we also have an industrial business. So this has resulted in a very broad product spectrum. So just one example, when we decided to get into electric traction motors, we looked around the business, and sure enough, we found out our industrial people have been selling electric motors for machine drives that are a similar power and torque rating for decades. So we didn't have to build that from scratch. Of course, we had to hire a lot of people to build that up on the automotive side to be able to meet automotive requirements. But there's so many examples. Batteries are another one where we do a lot of coating of different parts for corrosion protection, friction reduction. And you go talk to the coating people and they're like, oh yeah, sure, we can coat an anode for you, no problem. and so we've been able to kind of reassemble or draw on our history a lot more than you might think, given the bulk of our business being so traditional mechanical parts, you know, but been able to reassemble them. And then also probably one of the bigger challenges, but we've been pretty successful at, is convincing young talent that Schaeffler is a good place to come work on embedded software, because they're going to look up on the website and they're going to see bearings and, you know, clutch carriers and things, and they're going to think, where's the embedded software? So we've had to really work to tell that story, to say, hey, no, you've got a chance to get in on the ground floor here. You could be writing software for a new e-axle for the next BEV to come down the line, and that's been attractive to people, not to be able to get in on the foundation. So we're putting it together. It's not super easy, but we're putting it together.
What seems to be, when you're looking out at your customer base, the things that the traditional OEMs seem to be most interested in that you might be able to provide to them from a technological point of view? Is it hybrid technology? Is it BEV technology? Is it PHEV technology? I mean, where is it?
Yeah, I would say it's all of the above. We have a strong running business producing the hybrid module for all the Ford hybrid applications down in Worcester. So that's electric motor, disconnect, clutch, torque converter, all in one module. And that, of course, that's available as a hybrid and a plug-in hybrid. So that's been the most successful hybrid program we've been involved in, and we've been involved in many of them for years, whether we were making dampers or simple mechanical parts or not. But that's the first one where the volumes really are exceeding the estimates at the beginning. But then, yeah, certainly electric vehicle technology. There's while there is a certain desire on the part of the OEMs to continue to produce their own powertrains, there's also a lot of applications that are maybe niche enough or specialized enough that they're outsourcing those. And we're having pretty good success grabbing some of that business. And then also, we're finding more and more some of these chassis mechatronics products are being driven by the way battery electric vehicles are changing vehicle geometry. So you want to fit in more battery cells, so you end up pushing the wheelbase out. So that makes the car harder to park. So all of a sudden, a rear steer option doesn't seem like such a bad idea anymore. And then, by the way, you can improve maneuverability on the freeway with it. And so products like that are also coming along on the coattails of the electric revolution, if you will.
So you were talking about the hybrid system that you're using for Ford, and so that's, for example, in the Explorer, and so that's a motor and the associated mechanisms that are in the transmission bell housing. Is that what you guys do.
Correct. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So really, you put this module like on the front of the bell housing, the torque converter goes in its normal location, and then you bolt the engine and transmission together and you have a hybrid minus a whole bunch of calibration work and software and everything. But it's a pretty convenient hybrid. And when you look at the US market, where not only do we have big distances between cities compared to Europe, for example, so you need to be able to jump in and make a long trip. Some people fairly regularly, a couple times a month, where you're maybe not going to want to charge your BEV. And then if you're also hooking a trailer behind that vehicle while you're making that trip, it makes a hybrid even much more recommendable. So we think hybrids will have legs in this country for quite a while during this transition to eventually electrified propulsion.
So Jeff, when you mentioned hybrids and different applications, so everything from say like a 48-volt mild hybrid to a hybrid to a plug-in to maybe even like an axle assist motor where there's it's a gas engine but the rear axle is fully electric. I've read recently some of Schaeffler's solutions to that. Can you speak to how you approach that, the different sizing? Because you have the same idea for a motor and different packaging for it all. But like I said, if I read correctly, you guys have a sort of interesting approach to sizing those different applications in an efficient way.
Yeah, well, we have some software that helps us with that. That you can kind of put in the geometry parameters and pretty easily play around and get a good idea, what layout of motor might help. We've also divided, we actually have two traction motor groups. One of them makes the kind of donut motors like you would use in a hybrid module that are big in diameter but axially short. And the other makes what might go in an e-axle, the more pop can shape of electric motors. And so they're both pretty good at scaling those up and down. And it's pretty obvious, like the donut type goes in a wheel hub motor. It's a natural fit there. Yeah, we've just kind of built up a family of motors, if you will.
Jeff, how do you make these electric motors more efficient? Or is it that even that much important? I mean, they're pretty efficient now, right? But I know you guys are working on induction motors, permanent magnet motors, and you're coming up with some improvements there.
Yeah, it's really remarkable. I was looking up some of the history and found a electric motor patent from almost 200 years ago. And so you would think we got to throw up our hands, right? We got to be done at some point in time. But there's just no stopping engineers. We have ideas that like our direct injected slot cooling, where we can pull the heat right out of the copper windings and even maybe eliminate auxiliary heaters with that. And that buys you mostly power density, but also efficiency. Ideas like passive field weakening mechanisms, just crazy things that you wouldn't have thought anybody would think of. And they only buy you, let's say 1, 2, 3% points of efficiency. And an electric vehicle is phenomenally efficient already compared to an internal combustion engine vehicle. But the difference is that in the combustion engine vehicle, you have, relative to a BEV, at least, a more or less unlimited amount of energy on board. When you have a battery, in spite of how big and heavy they are, you have almost an order of magnitude less energy on board. So all of a sudden, 2% of what's in your gas tank is not that much, but 2% of what's in your battery is $300 or $400 worth of battery. Also you can even just look at how you use the electric motor on the cycle. And an electric motor has a pretty big sweet spot of very high efficiencies, even over 90%. But on the cycle, a lot of times you're down in the 70-75% range. So some of the things we can do are just design the motor such that the sweet spot is closer to where you use it on the cycle. And these things can really add up into either some battery savings or longer ranges for the vehicles. So
So what do you do to make them more efficient in the, to get them more into the sweet spot? Turn the motors slower or what?
Well, a couple of things. One, I mentioned the passive field weakening. So we've developed.
Yeah, what's that? What is that?
It's hard to explain without diagrams, but basically an electric motor, a permanent magnet electric motor, starts to fight itself at higher speeds because the permanent magnetic fields are sort of counter-generating within the coils of the motor, if you will. And so we've developed a mechanism where basically the rotor with the permanent magnets is in two parts. And under the influence of torque and speed, they actually rotate relative to each other. So they misalign the permanent magnets, and that makes the field weaker, and that makes the motor more efficient, say at higher speeds. And so you can make a passive mechanism like that, and that's where you can push that efficiency map closer down into the operating range of the vehicle. So that's one thing, but one other thing is just motor sizing. For example, if you have an electric vehicle, which is pretty common with a front electric motor and a rear electric motor, we've done a series of studies to show that just by properly proportioning the primary drive and the say auxiliary drive, you can gain another 2-3% efficiency. And again, just because a smaller motor, the sweet spot's naturally going to be more where the operating points on the cycle are, so or on the daily driving, if you will.
So Jeff, you mentioned earlier that OEMs tend to want to make their own powertrain systems, which I guess now we would call propulsion systems.
Mm-hmm.
So when you guys at Schaeffler are involved in doing development, I mean, are you developing things with hopes that the OEMs will say, oh, that's better than ours, we'll take that one?
Well, yes. I mean, we're always trying to invent new things. But I guess I should have mentioned that we're also happy to be a component supplier for electric axles. So we do everything from bearings. We've got a whole library of new kinds of bearings that can conduct electricity around the rolling elements so they don't get burned from arcs, and all the way up to like a compact differential, or even like a rotor or a stator, we're also happy to manufacture. So we'd be really delighted if we could invent a whole axle that compels them to order it from us, but we're just as happy if we have a differential that saves 3 kilograms and they order it.
Oh, looks like Jeff is frozen up on us there.
That from us as well.
Oh yeah, you froze up on us there for a second, Jeff.
Yeah, I thought you guys froze.
Oh yeah. Well, maybe we all did. Yeah.
Good to be back, anyhow.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hey, I've got a question then. As long as we're talking electric motors, what about hub motors? Because I'm intrigued by that. I think electric cars give designers a lot of design flexibility. I think hub motors take that to the nth degree. But, there's all this talk about, unsprung weight and how that might affect the vehicle. The only ones that I'm aware of that have got them in production right now is Lordstown Motors with their endurance pickup truck. But what's your thought? How far can hub motors take this industry?
I think there's a place for hub motors. It'd definitely be interesting to see how the Lordstown example works out. You summarized the argument exactly correctly. It allows you to make a completely different kind of vehicle. But on the other hand, you have unsprung mass, which is a manageable issue in our opinion. But you also are almost necessarily adding cost because now you need 2 inverters, where with an electric axle, you can use one inverter to power the axle. So it has to be an application where you really gain some advantage from being able to reconfigure the vehicle. So we always thought the first application for that would be in these robo-taxis. Every company these days, suppliers and OEMs, we all have a robo-taxi we've developed. And a hub motor really allows
Darn it.
you to, but to our surprise, it turns out our first production application is going to be in an autonomous street sweeper. And that's because the way that vehicle is laid out, they have to have four-wheel drive. And if they put electric axles front and back, it gets in the way of all the other mechanisms. So they were almost compelled to use hub motors. And so that's where the production will start. But I still think we will see robo-taxis like that. We'll see some of these little delivery pod type vehicles that'll be taking advantage of wheel hub motors. So I still think there's an upside there. It's probably not your everyday application. It's not every sedan, every SUV one day, but there's definitely a market slice for it.
Mm-hmm. Does it make the architecture of the vehicle, though, I mean, in terms of networking everything, more difficult, or is it just pretty much a wash?
Well, there's definitely wiring that you have to do to get all of those connected. And of course, it's double the load on the processors if you have two electric motors to control as compared to one. And there's also a bit of a functional safety issue in there, because whenever you have hub motors, any error in the position of those motors is going to steer the vehicle as well. So you have to be very, very sure that you're fully redundant and you know if the vehicle's actually going straight or not, and things like that. So there's some overhead on the functional safety side as well.
So with four motors, like that sweeper you're talking about, it would be even more complicated.
Right. You've got four inverters. They all have to have their own individual motor control. And then you need some master controller that, is making sure everybody's playing nice together. And yeah, so there's definite overhead there.
But also think of the maneuverability, Gary. I mean, you can, you've got full skid steer control. You put in some different, if you put a steering on every axle, thing could go everywhere.
Yeah, but they're developing four-wheel steering right now, aren't they?
Yeah, we are. But to that point, we actually built a car with four hub wheel motors just as a demonstrator, and you can actually spin it around its own center of gravity. It's crazy to watch. Yeah, you really have full control over the vehicle with four hub motors.
So when you're talking to OEMs and your relationships with them between, okay, we're happy to supply components or we can supply full solutions, how much of that is saying, hey, we've found something here that maybe you didn't know, whether it's rear steer that you mentioned or hub motors or, something like ride height, a super efficient way to lower ride height and lower wind resistance. How much of that comes from your side and how much of that comes from the OEMs asking for it?
Well, it's hard to say as a percentage. I mean, there's kind of two ways that flows. One is we'll get a request for quote, say for bearings or for a complete axle or whatever it may be. And then we'll use that as an opportunity to go and say, nice design, but have you thought about this? And then it just depends how compelling the argument is. And then the other way is we're constantly working with all the advanced and research groups at the OEMs. So we'll just be going and showing them new ideas. And sometimes those things will trickle into a new design as well.
So Jeff, we didn't mention this, but I think that might be germane to what you're saying. So Schaeffler is a German company. I mean, it's based in Germany. So to what extent does your team here in the U.S. work with your colleagues in Germany, and then your colleagues in Germany working with the OEMs over there? I mean, are you seeing a good flow back and forth of ideas for development? And I mean, can you discern a difference in terms of what the German OEMs seem to be interested in versus what the US based OEMs are interested in?
Yeah, definitely can. Well, to the first part of the question, we've defined a global e-mobility network. So for example, I mentioned the two kinds of motors, the hollow motors and the pop can motors. The hollow motors are actually headquartered in Worcester. So even if there's a hybrid application in Germany or China, the motor team in Worcester would design the motor for them. And likewise, the e-axle motors are in Germany. So when we need an e-axle motor, we go to Germany for it. And the collaboration has been really good globally. Almost all of these electrification projects are somehow global projects where we're working in a global network. So that part has worked out really well and actually really improved our transatlantic cooperation, which has been exciting. But yeah, the markets are quite a lot different. With the U.S. is either a pure BEV market or a rear-wheel drive hybrid market so far. But in Europe, they're still very interested in things like dedicated hybrid transmissions, where you actually make a transmission with the electric motor or motors in it and a gear layout of some kind to make an efficient hybrid. That's something we've discussed with all of our customers in the U.S., but it's a non-starter here. But in Europe, there's still a strong demand for that.
Mm-hmm. Jeff, before the show got started, Cesar Trujillo posted some questions in the chat room that I thought was pretty good. He says, with this transition to all this new technology that you're talking about, the people in the factories are worried about their jobs. And he wanted to know, are you going to be going with greenfield sites to get into all this new technology, or will you convert existing plants, or what?
I guess the answer is yes. We're certainly going to make use of all our existing factories, and there's definitely no need for our workers to be afraid of their jobs. Our bigger problem is to find enough workers, actually. But yeah, we have a plan eventually to kind of repeat what we did with manual clutches, where we slowly migrate the remaining automatic production, say down to Mexico, or whatever market it might be for, and then build up the electrification production in maybe primarily our Worcester campus. But no matter what we do there, it's not going to be enough. So we're also looking into some greenfield sites. But yeah, I think our bigger challenge will be to find enough workers than to have to worry about letting any of them go, the way it looks right now, at least.
Great.
So I think I should throw in for our audience that are not familiar with the area, when you're saying Worcester, it's in Ohio.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Yeah, I should mention that. Not too many people
are familiar with that. You know, not everybody's in this part of the world.
Right.
Yeah, no, you could easily assume it's Massachusetts.
Right. Probably would.
Yeah, that's right.
So, Jeff, you know, you said you've been in this business for a number of years now. In terms of the technology development that you're engaged with right now versus the technology development 10 years ago, I mean, can you put this on some sort of a scale in terms of how you're seeing, you know, what the demands are on you and your colleagues on a daily basis now compared to then?
Well, I've always said, for each of my 35 years, I've always said it's a great year to be an engineer, because there's always something new coming. And it's been true every year, but it is, I don't know if it's an order of magnitude faster change, but it's got to be close to that. Just the breadth of topics that we're covering today compared to even 5 years ago. And John, you were at our symposium, you saw the technology we were showing almost wouldn't fit in a day, compared to, you know, that symposium even 8 years ago was primarily a automatic transmission symposium. And now we have batteries, fuel cells, electric axles, steering, ride height adjustment. It just unbelievable. So yeah, the rate of change is by far the fastest in my career, for sure.
Mm-hmm. You know, we're just at the bottom half of the hour here. That's probably a good note to end this up on with you, Jeff. Thanks so much for coming on. I know we only scratched the surface of the things that you're working on, because you're right. I was at the symposium, and even that was like drinking from the fire hose. There was so much information coming. Well, we'll have to have you back, you know, because I know you're going to be interested, working on even more interesting things going forward.
Yeah, be happy to do it. I enjoy talking to you guys. Thanks for having me.
Okay, real good. We're going to take a quick commercial break. We're going to be back talking about all things that have been going on in the automotive industry this last week and even before that.
How do Bridgestone tires stop shorter on what roads? It's their HydroTrack technology. But you don't have to know how the science works, just where the brake is. What really matters is their Bridgestone.
And we are back. And Gary always has a list of topics that he wants us to get into. So what you got there?
Okay. So here's there was still another announcement from another OEM this week that said we are going to be deploying Amazon Alexa in our vehicles. And I looked at the Amazon Automotive website. There are car companies as long as your arm using Alexa. So here's my question to you guys. Are they using Alexa because it is very familiar to the consumers, or are they using Alexa because it is superior technology to what they could develop, or is it something else?
Go ahead, Mike. This is right up your alley.
I have a couple theories. First off, I think in some cases it's an additive thing, right? Like you have, I don't know, you have a couple things where you can say Alexa connects to so many other apps or services you have in your life. So it's this good intermediate connection, or you can go all the way up to like the Lucid Air, for example, is pretty much a lot of that system is powered by Alexa. So there's different degrees of what you want, but on the basic level, you're just kind of throwing the kitchen sink of like, you can use Alexa to connect a bunch of different apps or, monitor your phone. So probably customer demand. And it's a lot of people have it. The other piece though, is I think that Amazon has made it easy. The rumor or, chatter has always been that Apple is very finicky when it comes to, making sure like the control they have over the way CarPlay is presented in the car. There's not a lot of leeway. It's their way or the highway. And I think, Amazon took a different approach to selling this to the OEMs and just sort of saying, here you go. Again, if you look at like the Lucid being example, it's still working its way out, but some of the features weren't there at the start, or even the aftermarket module that you can put in your car. They just came out with the second version of that. The first one, wasn't reviewed very well. So I think it's automakers are looking for just giving people as much stuff as they can, and Alexa is a convenient piece of that, but also Amazon has probably done a good job of selling it.
Yeah, I think the car companies would love to control all this themselves, but they can't keep up with the tech companies. They don't have the resources, especially in software engineers. And besides, everybody knows about Alexa, so it's actually a selling point. Hey, we got Alexa in our car. We're so cool, because they couldn't do it themselves, or the public wouldn't, I'm not going to say trust, but they wouldn't think it's as good as what Alexa can give them. But Gary, to your point, I think the bigger question here is who's going to control the dashboard? Is it going to be the tech companies, or is it going to be the automakers? And so far, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, and Apple are winning this battle. In fact, I would say they probably already won.
So do you guys see this as being a change in terms of the management at the car companies? I mean, it used to be that, okay, if we go way back into the Wayback Machine when Ford came out with the first version of Sync, and they boasted, okay, this is powered by Microsoft, and so we can affiliate our name with that name. But pretty much it seems to me that over the years that the OEMs have wanted to guard all of that space. They wanted to make that theirs, and to the point of designing their own navigation systems, when it had always seemed to me that Garmin did a pretty good job and knew what they were doing. Yet what was it? I think Ram used Garmin for a very short period of time, and then that went away. And so are the management teams saying, hey, there are things we can't do, and we'll just turn it over to Amazon or to Google or to Microsoft or to Apple?
I mean, I think what John said is everything's just kind of too big. So you have a finite number of engineering resources. My guess is you have a finite number of engineering resources. If you're an OEM, you're putting that money into over-the-air updates, all of the calibration, all of the vehicle systems working together. When it comes to telling my car to put up my connected garage door when I get home, that already works on these other systems. just make it a call that goes back and forth between those systems, and don't worry about it. Put your resources into the stuff that's more important from, an overall picture.
Yeah, I mean, it's the problem with the legacy OEMs right now is they gotta keep feeding their internal combustion engine programs. They have to develop these all new battery electric cars. They got to get into the stuff that you were talking about, Mike, over the air updates and things like that. They've run out of resources. They can't do all this kind of stuff that the Amazon, Googles, and Apples and Microsofts can do. That's why I say, to me, it's game over. The tech industry won the dashboard.
Okay, so let's take that a little further though. So if the point is that the consumer is completely familiar with whether it's an iPhone or Alexa or the multiplicity of Google apps, that 5-10 years from now they might say, I'll buy a vehicle from those guys because vehicles now are basically computers on wheels. And so, what do the legacy automakers know about that?
Well, here's the reason why the tech industry, I don't believe, is going to get into making cars. The margins stink. I mean, I'm told that Apple doesn't get into a new program unless it knows it's going to have 35% profit margins. Welcome to the auto industry, guys, where 8 to 10% is considered really, really good. And so why should they invest all that capital and do all that? They've got these legacy automakers who will happily build all the cars that the world needs, and they can stick whatever stuff that they've got, that the tech industry can stick whatever they want in those cars and make great margins.
What do you think, Mike?
Same thing. I mean, you look at the capital expenditure and the return, or the length of the return, and most people outside of the automotive industry, none of that makes sense. Why are you in business? And with the tech piece, I think a great example in Europe is Alpine and Renault. Some of their cars now, it's just bring your own device. They're saying, we've got a spot, put your phone here, and everything runs through the app. We're not even bothering to put it in the car because we know you're already carrying it with you. And to me, I think that's a smart solution for it, because again, you get this problem, even if you have Alexa in your car or any of these other things, at some point they're going to stop supporting the software. And that's an issue that, the OEMs and the tech companies haven't really dealt with yet.
Well, speaking of why somebody would get into the auto business, I mean, let's talk about everybody's favorite car company, Tesla, right? And they reported their third quarter and a 42% increase, which ain't bad. Yeah, and I thought it was sort of funny that the investment community thought instead of them selling 343,000 vehicles, that they'd sell 364,000 vehicles. Therefore, they got a knock on that. And it's just like that number of electric vehicles, when you look at all the other OEMs combined, it just dwarfs them. So it's like this is a little odd to me. But I put to you guys, is it inevitable that Tesla continues on this course, or is it possible that the traditional OEMs might be able to, not just take away some of the pie is going to get bigger and everybody's going to get a different size slice. But I mean, is it possible that Tesla's slice proportionately gets smaller because they are able to provide levels of comfort and convenience, meaning the traditional OEMs, compared to what Tesla does?
You want to say?
Yeah, I can go for. I mean, yeah. If you look at the sales right now, Tesla is pretty close to like half of all American battery electric sales. So, you could say, yeah, the margin or the market share is probably going to go down, just because they're on a shallower point of the growth curve. That like the overall BEV sales are going to go up. It seems unlikely that Tesla's going to keep getting half of every new BEV sale. So, on that front, yeah, the market share is going to go down. If the overall, is the overall volume going to go down, or are they going to have a decline? I've said this every time I come on here, you bring up Tesla, and I'm like, every assumption about Tesla usually ends up being wrong. So, they'll pull it out of their hat, although they have, their product line is kind of old. So I'm interested to see how much they can get by on that with the Model 3 aging and the Model S, like 9 years old at this point. That's not as much of their sales. It's mostly Model Y and Model 3, but I'm interested to see how much momentum they can keep on those older vehicles. But again, hats off to them. They've sort of disproven the market cycle idea that you need to constantly be putting new stuff out there.
Yeah, look at we had Tim Knuskis on recently. Look at the Charger and the Challenger. I mean, that's the oldest platform in the business, and they're still going strong. So, and then we had help me out here, Gary, Tom, with the resale value, Tom Libby.
Tom Libby from S&P Mobility.
From S&P, and what he found is like back in May of this year, the Model Y was getting 76% owner loyalty rates, i.e. people who already had a Model Y were going out and buying the exact same damn car, but they wanted the quote unquote new one. So, so far Tesla has been able to buck the trend. They have not been impacted by having styling that's many years old at this point, by traditional automotive standards. And they've made the argument work that we can update the car over the air and people are going to love that. So far it's working. But to your point, Mike, they haven't seen the legacies really start to fight yet. And unfortunately for most of the legacies, they're not going to have their best foot forward for about another 3 years, which is when we're going to see total clean sheet, skateboard designs, with, modern electronic architectures and all that sort of stuff hit the street. But I think Tesla's got almost free reign for the next 3 years.
Well, I mean, one of the things I think about is that like within a quarter of a mile of where I'm sitting right now in the studio, there are a half a dozen car dealers, okay, and various brands. And so odds are, if somebody has a vehicle, one of those would be able to take care of it. Okay, where is a Tesla dealer around here in southeastern Michigan? John shaking his head for those of you.
I think the closest service center is Toledo, but I'm not sure.
Well, they're building one in Ann Arbor.
Okay.
But that's it. They're building one in Ann Arbor.
So this gets back to my point of, at some point as the mass consumer buys an electric vehicle, is it not going to be a situation whereby the traditionals could conceivably, I mean, if they do this right, make it so it's more appealing to buy a Ford than it is to buy a Tesla, just because, we're Ford or we're Chevrolet or we're Jeep, we know you, we know how to take care of you, versus this, this model of, come to us and we'll take care of you.
Well, look, the legacies are counting on exactly that, Gary. They keep talking about how they see their they want to change the way they work with the dealers, but they also see their dealers as an asset, because to your very point, there's a dealership in every community. If you're Ford or Chevy or Toyota breaks down, there's somebody near enough that AAA or somebody can tow you to the dealership. Tesla, though, they've dealt with this so far. They've got their roving service operations and the like. And so far it's worked. But as they start to really scale up, now we'll see if people who are not early EV adopters warm up to the idea of not having local dealerships around.
Yeah, I would say same thing. We have to acknowledge Tesla's head start. And one piece of that isn't just the service, it's the charging, right? If you look on social media, anything about going to a non-Tesla charger and how often they're broken or not giving you full service, a piece of that service is, if you have a Tesla, a piece of the service is just charging. And again, if you asked me 3 years ago if they'd be able to support their service network on, at the volume they're at now, I would have said no way. They've done it so far. But the thing that the legacy automakers have going for them is those dealers that, it's right up the street. You can take it there, and they're doing, some of them are doing things to get make sure the dealers are on board. Cadillac and Buick offered buyouts. Ford is saying, if you want to sell EVs, you have to sign on to our new program. One of which is, if you want to be in the higher tier, putting a DC fast charge in your store. And that, I think, is a good way to counter the Tesla supercharger and the slowly improving public charging network. But again, Tesla has a head start of, at least 3 years still.
So Mike, as you look and study, the EV market, I mean, to what extent is charging availability a key to people making a choice about what they're going to buy?
I don't, in terms of like a buying consideration, I don't know where that falls, but I would say it's, that's in terms of public perception, it's huge. People don't realize, people think you can't charge, they think you can't go on a road trip. I would say the average consumer or the average gas car person doesn't really understand, on the good side and the bad side of range, like how much you can drive when you're going on a road trip, but also, how much you're not going to need to charge if you're doing your day-to-day errands. So there's a huge, I think there's a huge sort of familiarity knowledge gap in the everyday consumer. And again, Tesla people there's a little bit of self-selecting there, but there's also just, if you talk to anyone that has a Tesla, it's like, yeah, there's the supercharger network and it works. And you don't have to go into this much muddier picture of where actually are the chargers and how do I charge it? And is it going to work?
So Edmunds came out with some numbers that I found to be rather astonishing. And so they found that 26% of EV buyers who financed their vehicles are paying $1,000 plus per month. And, I'm just looking at what's going on with the economy right now. And I wonder how long this can be sustained. Morning Consults asked people about, whether they'd buy an EV or not. And 66% said their number one concern is price. Is the whole EV thing going to price itself into staying more niche than it otherwise might?
At $1,000 a month, it will. But guess what? Even the ICE vehicles are knocking on the door of $1,000 a month. It's not just the EVs, and that's because the people who are left in the market are higher income people who are buying a richer mix of vehicles and loading them up. And that's going to be a real problem because. Look, we reported this on Autoline Daily today. Stellantis, their CPO program, their certified pre-owned, they used to have a cap. The car could not be older than 5 years old, could not have more than 75,000 miles on the odometer. Now they're taking it up to 10 years old and 120,000 miles on the odometer. Why are they doing that? Because not only are new cars out of people's reach, so are used cars. So by adding much older vehicles into the mix, they're coming up with a lower monthly payment. But I think, there should be alarm bells for the automotive industry. This is not sustainable. And I don't know what the solution is, but it's, I'll tell you what the solution will be short-term. People are just going to hold on to their older cars. They're going to get them fixed up because that's going to be the cheapest solution for them.
But you also reported on Daily today, John, that the price of the entry Ford Lightning, the Pro model, which is for the model for contractors, has gone up again and now has a base price of roughly 52 grand.
Right. And remember, it came out at 40 grand.
Right. So.
Well, with all of this, though, is we still haven't met demand. There's still more demand than supply. So, yeah, long term, it sounds like it can't be sustainable. But I would even say for the next year, there's still pent up demand and people are putting up with the prices, which is why we've, probably for a year now, we've had stories of the price keeps going up and people are financing on longer terms. With the EV picture, the average transaction price for all cars is over 40 grand now. I think EVs average something like 18,000 more on average. But as the average price of cars keeps creeping up, and we have these new affordable EVs coming in, well, affordable again, relative, but there's more 45,000-ish EVs coming and on the way. I think you're going to see that parity evening out. That all of a sudden, okay, maybe apples to apples, an internal combustion engine car costs more, but you can get a nice $45,000 gas car or a nice $45,000 battery car. To me, I think it's not going to slow down battery electric sales.
But what about the $25,000 gas car or the $25,000 hybrid car? I mean, doesn't that become more appealing to someone who's looking at it and saying, geez, paying that monthly nut for, 45 grand is a little daunting.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
is. But, to Mike's point, people are still lining up to buy cars. And, when Ford announced that it was raising the Lightning Pro by another $5,000, they said, oh, raw materials, this, inflation, that, and other market forces. Other market forces means they realize they can get away with it. They can charge that much more.
And I just wonder how long that string plays out. And I just wonder. And it's sort of ironic, like you're saying, like 45 grand is a reasonable price to buy a new car. And I mean, doesn't that seem somewhat bizarre? I mean,
Oh yeah.
I mean, you can buy a loaded Accord for less than that.
I mean, it's yeah, but even then, I mean, there's not a lot of cars that you can. Well, again, with the supply challenges, in theory, there's plenty of Accords that are under 25 grand. Find one on a dealer lot, and the automakers are building the expensive cars. And I'm saying all this, and then also when you look at batteries, there's probably in the next 3 years, there's probably going to be some sort of shortage. Either the factories aren't going to come online on time, or there's going to be a raw material spike, like they're already doing on the F-150 Lightning. But, again, people are just paying it because they don't have a choice. So, again, I don't, it's not good, but I don't see it slowing down.
Yeah. Here's the one thing though, interest rates have gone sky high. That is brooming out all the subprime people who can't make that $1,000 a month or even less than that, or who are unable to get bank loans right now because interest rates have gone up so high. Let this run out a little bit, and the automotive industry is going to have a come to Jesus meeting on what it's got to do about it.
So you think that those people are fundamental to the success or profitability of OEMs going forward?
Oh, you'd be surprised how many subprime people buy new cars, and they pay higher interest rates, which in most cases, like with GM and Ford, they do all the financing of it. They're reaping the benefits of being able to give loans to people that don't have the most stellar credit ratings. It's not that they're big credit risks. It's just that they don't have the best credit ratings. But these latest interest rates are pushing those people right out of the market. Same going on with housing too.
So you mentioned Stellantis earlier, and Carlos Tavares, the CEO of Stellantis, said earlier this week that he thinks the semiconductor shortage is going to continue through 2023, which then, Mike, goes back to your point of like, at some point, these issues have to be resolved. I mean, so is this meaning 2024 that things become reasonable?
Given the last 3 years, I would say no. There's going to be some other hurdle. Gas prices they're headed up now. I wouldn't be surprised if it's just more that becomes more volatile, and then battery material volatility. Again, we're in this ramp up phase, so a lot of things can for battery stuff. We're in this ramp up phase where a lot of things can disrupt it. Right? There's a huge spike in demand for lithium. It hasn't sort of settled out. So yeah, my bet is, okay, we can solve semiconductors. Something else will be a problem before 2024.
For sure.
Well, so do you think that, the OPEC plus saying, okay, we're going to take 2 million barrels of oil out, is going to drive demand for EVs, and then people are going to go to their local EV dealer and see that there's this big line, or the waiting list is closed, or it's just unaffordable, and therefore they're going to keep their old car or buy one of these Stellantis CPO cars that you talked about, John?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's no question that when gas prices go up suddenly and by a lot, people get religion about fuel efficiency. They get out of big pickups and SUVs and they go to smaller cars. They go to hybrids and the like. And there's no question that, with the recent run up in gas prices earlier this year, it generated a whole lot more interest in electric vehicles. And now with, OPEC going to cut production, prices are going back to where they were earlier this year. A lot of people are going to go, here we go again. I can't deal with this. I can't spend $100 to fill my tank every time I stop. Maybe it's time to look more seriously at an electric car.
I think too, there's a little bit of, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Like automakers have scaled back on making cars and go way back to when they used to make big rear-wheel drive cars. Like, well, what happened to the big rear-wheel drive cars? Why did the SUVs take over? It's like, well, the SUVs were, you didn't have the big rear-wheel drive car in the showroom. You had the SUV, and that's what people went for. Some of that's going to happen as, companies like GM switch over to fully electric. It's just, this is the car that's available. And, maybe you like the dealer, or maybe that's the only thing that's out there. But also, this year we had the gas price spike, but even later, after gas prices calmed down, EV sales have still climbed. And interestingly, the U.S. Crossed over 5% for plug-in and battery electrics, which in other countries has been this breakover point where it starts leading to greater adoption. So I think the two things at play are, they're going to be more available, but also there's going to be less other stuff available. And then also it's just becoming more part of the landscape, and it's more normal to buy an EV.
Even more interesting, if you look at just retail sales, i.e. take fleet out of it, EVs hit 7.5%. So that's very telling, because that's individual people, not some sort of corporate fleet buy.
So, but Mike, to what extent do you think that, OEMs have been making thermal engine powered vehicles for 120 years. They know the costs down to a fraction of a cent. And here they're in a new sphere in dealing with things like lithium and cobalt and nickel in ways that they've never done before. And, we had Jeff Hemphill talking about, different types of motors and, different ways that the motors work. And clearly they don't have as good a handle on the price of what it would take them to build those products. And, and again, if we go back to the Ford Pro, I mean, they're showing, well, gee, we need to adjust this up, or, be more skeptical like John. They're just doing that because they can. I wonder whether, as we're moving forward, that it's going to take a while for them to actually say, okay, this is the real cost of something. And that real cost might be higher than people may have been led to expect that they would be.
Yeah, I mean, the main thing is there's a lot of weight and a lot of raw materials that goes into batteries, and it's not this sort of, they're commodities, but the pricing moves around a lot more, just because if we're gonna meet these targets that everyone is talking about, so a lot of this is driven by regulation too. The automakers, I think there's a reason to have ICE-powered cars, and there's use for ICE-powered cars, and they're probably going to hang on a lot longer than some people think or some people worry about. But China and Europe and to a lesser degree California are pushing for batteries. So the automakers don't really have a choice to some degree. They're just like, yeah, we know this. We know traditional cars, and we know how to build them. We know how to price them. We know how to cost them. But we have to do this other thing, so we're going to figure it out. And I think it'll so, the main thing is, again, we're in a ramp up phase, and there's going to be volatility. But if you look at batteries and how much battery prices have declined per kilowatt hour in the last 10 years, again, if 10 years ago, someone would have been like, there's no way that you're going to find that many efficiency. On the other hand, there's probably some assumptions people are looking at as we change, we go from graphite to silicon and other battery advances that we're sort of hoping for, that these things are going to be scalable and come down the line and bring the cost down and change the materials picture. But my guess is the automakers are looking at this and saying, we can make some pretty healthy long-term bets.
Yeah. Gary, we're at the top of the hour. You got a burning issue, or?
Oh, nothing's burning, John.
Is Paris burning?
Yes.
Well, hey, then time to wrap this up. Mike Austin, Great having you on the show again. This time with Guidehouse.
Yeah, glad to be back.
It's cool. And Gary, we'll keep on doing this.
Okay. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, guys.
Autoline After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, solutions for your journey.
If you like this program and would like to learn more about the automotive industry, check out our website at autoline.tv or look for us on YouTube on the Autoline channel.